Welcome to a new episode of Happy Hour featuring Dr. Starlyn Hawes, a trailblazer in health and rehab psychology. With a career spanning over 16 years, Dr. Hawes is passionate about guiding individuals through life's complexities with empathy and insight. Join us as she unravels the art of balancing life's demands, the power of self-awareness, and the transformative journey of perimenopause and menopause. She has a holistic vision for living a fulfilling and empowered life. Tune in, and lastly, don't forget to like and subscribe.
Welcome to Happy Hour, Dr. Hawes.
Thank you.
Super excited to have you. I know we've been connecting for quite some time, and I know when we first discovered you and your practice, I think both me and the whole team here at Happy were like, we need to have you on the show. The first word that came to me was grounded when I read about your practice. So yeah, for just the audience and folks listening, if you can, give us an introduction to yourself, your practice.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. I appreciate the word grounded. It does resonate so much with who I am as a person and how I want to show up in my practice and in life. And it seems like that comes through on my website and maybe in interactions with me as well. So that's great. I've been in the field for over 16 years, and my primary focus is on health and rehab psychology. And rehab psychology is a fancy way of saying I work with folks who have a variety of medical conditions, whether they're chronic or um, acute. And I really follow people over the course of that experience with the idea of helping people lead a life worth living. We have things happen, and it can be difficult to figure out a path forward. And so I really strive to be a provider who can meet people where they are, see things through their lens, and support them in a holistic way because you're a whole person with so much dimension. And that's not always readily available, and people don't always know that this specialty exists.
Yeah. I guess, let me ask you, going backwards, what's a little bit of your origin story of being a grounded clinician? Obviously, there's all this wild stigma around mental health, and luckily, I've seen it's becoming a lot less day by day. There are unique challenges that come up, like AI and all the other things that come up, but grounded seems like a very relevant term in today's society. So yeah, how did you find your way into therapy, and how did you embody this notion of grounded?
Gosh, that's such a good question. I will do the best I can to answer that. But I do just remember as a child, I really looked up to my grandmother,
Wow.
and I knew that she had health conditions that she was managing. And I always viewed her as steadfast and powerful. I also felt very seen by her.
That's beautiful.
And when I went into undergrad, I'll be honest, I didn't always have it figured out. I had people who saw me and approached me
That's
and
awesome.
recruited me kind of into this space. If I'm
Wow.
really honest
You just
about
have the
that.
energy.
Mhm. Yeah, and I actually started out in academic advising, and
Wow.
that person connected me to a highly respected mentor that's still in my life.
Oh, that's awesome.
And she ushered me into this space, and health is where I knew I
Yeah.
wanted to be. I didn't know what specifically, but I started in cancer research,
Wow.
and cancer research became, okay, I want to become an academician.
Yeah.
And as I got into it, I did a lot of community-based work that was for the people, by the
Yeah.
people, with the people, results presented with the communities, uh, passionate about serving and being a part of. And at a certain point, I became interested in being more of a scientist practitioner,
Yeah.
meaning I was doing the clinical work, but I had the research background, would really back it up to make myself well-rounded. Part of the grounded piece, I think, came along very much organically. I think I've always been a curious person, curious about other people, why they might respond a certain way or do certain things, but also equally, if not more, curious about myself
Yeah.
and my inner workings and actually doing my own therapeutic work at a point. And I'll admit, it wasn't necessarily that I volunteered it. It was kind of encouraged as a part of our training program. And honestly, I think the work that I've done for myself, within myself, in that process makes me better suited to be the person in the other chair
So
because I get it
you
on a
walk the walk.
different
Yeah.
level. And I
Hmm.
think there's an amount of humility and humbleness that comes with knowing oneself on a more intimate level and not taking it for granted. And I think it makes me a more active steward of practicing what I teach. So hopefully that answers some of that.
It's funny, even in your word choice, it's easy. I was reading a quote the other day that talked about how uh, it is an egoist. It can be perceived as egoist when you talk about the pursuit of becoming a non-ego person, right? Even being regarded as a religious or spiritual or someone who's done the work, right? And it's fascinating because at least the way you said it, it sounds like there's this element of practice, like this integration into daily life. I mean, if I'm just, yes, we're behind two computer screens, but I can feel the energy. I can feel a deep level of attentiveness and focus and just a deep understanding of self, which then creates space for a much richer and deeper conversation. And I'm curious actually, like what I'm sure many people listening, they like who doesn't want that? Like who doesn't want to be a safe haven and a growth and anchor? Zooming all the way out to 100,000 feet, like your clinicians seeing people every single day. Within your lens of the practice, I know you focus on perimenopause and cancer and a very unique set of population. Like, what's happening in our society? Why is it a struggle for more and more people to be grounded?
Oh gosh, the first thing that jumps in my mind is the juggling act of so many
So much.
roles and responsibilities and really needing to try to figure out like what do I prioritize, and specifically as women we often have this massive mental load. We're thinking about everyone around us and we forget to apply our own oxygen.
Absolutely.
We can take care of ourselves and then show it better
Absolutely.
for others. And maybe sometimes we don't forget. Maybe we're very aware and we're still like, how do I make it work? Because I've got these competing demands. And then there's distraction. We have very much become a society that we get these dopamine hits from screens, right? We can't even just watch TV anymore.
Yeah.
We're on our phone. We might have our laptop out. You mentioned AI earlier. That's becoming a thread as well as people really almost having relationships. It's almost like a productivity partner for a lot
Yeah.
of people. And in some
Wow.
ways,
That's a very interesting phrase. I mean, we talk about it on the tech industry, like, oh, everyone should have the personal assistant in your pocket, which sounds great. But productivity partner, especially in a world of burnout, sounds a lot more destructive than assistive.
right. And it's a delicate balancing act. And I think that's where the fluidity of ebb and flow, sometimes you're going really hard and strong, and sometimes you are inviting in rest or respite. And knowing when to pump the brakes is so important. Often we think, oh, I need to slow down when I'm at a 8 out of 10 on the scale of tired, when really we should be checking in relatively consistently. And when we get to that middle ground of 4, 5, 6, being curious. And when I say curious, I really mean being curious. Where am I within myself, my emotions, my body, and giving yourself an opportunity to choose with intention
Yeah,
what you need or want to do for yourself versus always pushing, pushing, pushing. Being able to operate more in the middle tends to generally be more sustainable where possible.
absolutely. Yeah, and I think like it's interesting. Like I'm married with two children, and I see the juggling act that my wife does. And I think to a lot of men in our society, to be very honest, that mental labor is invisible. Um, And it was only until actually, it's funny, I'll reach for my desk here. My wife, she ordered this book.
That's
uh,
familiar.
And it's fascinating because I think it is like the way she would describe it is I have a bunch of Chrome tabs in my head at all times that never close. And I think it's fascinating. I'm curious. I want to go deeper into that. You said something interesting that sometimes you mentioned that there's this element of just wanting to do it all, but forgetting to help yourself. Is there and you is there an element of our culture that is breeding this for women? Is there an element of like hustle? I'll equate to like hustle culture of like you see in young generations. Is there a hustle culture for a lot of women in our society who are trying to do a lot? They're trying to work. They're trying to raise children. They're trying to stay balanced and healthy. They're trying to have social relationships. They're trying to build their businesses. It's almost like, yeah. Let's unpack that a little bit.
That's, again, a really good question. And I think that the framing that resonates more for me would be potentially more of the superwoman complex, right? Like, it's interesting. And there's cross-cultural
Yeah,
similarities
totally.
with this as well in terms of how we're socialized and what the norms are and what it means to, color within the lines and be conservative versus maybe pushing new boundaries and reaching new heights. And so there's this real I almost look at it, and I'm speaking as an individual versus someone from my profession at large when I
Sure.
do this, but it's this idea that I think there's a number of women that want to potentially push back
Yeah.
against the expectation that we are yes women. We are polite. We are easy. We are accommodating. And on some level, I think that's innate for
Yeah.
us to be all of those characteristics. And we are so much more.
Yeah.
And on some level, there can be so much empowerment in
Yeah.
choosing actively to be a homemaker and having
Right.
passion around that and having that be the thing that you do and nothing more. And there can be a lot of empowerment of being partially a homemaker and
Absolutely.
also having a career and using your brain in these different ways that just add more dimension and purpose. But I also say that to imply there is no one way to be empowered. You can be empowered
I
quietly
love that.
and loudly, and you can be a superwoman in your own right if that's what you want to be, no matter what it is you choose to be as an individual. But I use the superwoman term mostly because it's kind of this idea of I won't be contained. I won't be put in a box. I'm going to define who I am, and I am going to strive to remain on my purpose driven course. And that might change over time. And that's okay. It's about evolution on some level.
I love this framing, and it's interesting because, I have two daughters, and we named them after. So I grew up in a Hindu family. I'm a practicing Hindu, and our definition of divine feminine has both of these attributes. You have the embodied, nurturing, all that classical definition, but you also have this incredibly empowered nurse, goddess, Kali, right? Who's like has a head of skulls around her neck and will go to war and fight for justice, right? And what's fascinating is I'm curious. I always find like if I'm drawing a parallel example for men, right? I always find the framing that the greatest sense of strength is when you are self-aware. When you are you understand yourself. You're not necessarily defining a destiny, but you're carving out that destiny based off a deep sense of understanding of self and the continued iteration. I sometimes find in the narrative that's missing for women. It's all about the define power and perhaps I'm curious like where is the role of self-awareness for women in our society? And my first thought is, well, who who's got the time if you're literally doing everything to be self-aware?
Yeah. And it's so interesting. I can very much appreciate the sentiment of who's got the time to think about self awareness. And at the same time, being who I am as a person, I almost feel like it's so sensual because the reality is we always have ourself to come back to.
Yeah.
We always have ourself to answer to. And we're on some level our own greatest accountability partner on some
Yeah.
level. We can
Totally.
also be our own greatest critic, and we can address that a little bit later if you'd like. But for now, just staying in this space of how and maybe why, um, we live in a society that's very fickle. And if we're looking outside oneself for approval or how we rank order as compared to someone else, we're chasing a very fickle, moving target. And the responses that we get from people outside of ourselves might have little to nothing to do with us and everything to do with them. So when we choose to invest in being curious about ourselves, what we want, what we need, and we choose to be patient with the variability of clarity we might possess at certain check-ins within self, I think it facilitates an increased ease to ride the wave of unknown and uncertainty that inevitably greets us at different points.
It's fascinating, right? Because I think in our society we've prioritized, like, if you think about our company name is Happy, and it's funny because in America, the way we define happiness is more money. That's just we celebrate capitalism in this manner, and I think it's a great force for good. But if we're being real, I think this country's lost its way in the pursuit of money. But it almost sounds like what you're saying is the prize is not the pursuit of anything external. It's actually the pursuit of oneself and understanding oneself.
I would say that that can be quite an empowered place to operate from because then you can be reassured that when it comes to you, you are the one who can influence your thoughts, your emotions, and behaviors.
Totally. When you're the observer position, you get to choose. Coming back to it, I think, it's, I read this quote and I'm curious to your thoughts on this. I don't know where it was from, but it said the sign of a successful society is when the women are at rest and they're at peace. And I thought about it and I was like, wow, a place where you have safety built in, you have abundance built in, you have all these things. And I'm just curious, like, my heart goes out because I don't think it's talked about enough, especially in the macro political situation of like what is happening to the humans who are raising lives, for the women who are raising children, and for the women who are carving out their identities in our society. And it almost seems like we're going backwards a little bit. And so for those who are listening who might be like, yeah, I'm struggling. This is hard. What are some tactical things that you recommend in your practice, right? To to help women specifically get to a place of ease or get to a place of not having to do it all.
I mean, I will say I feel that deeply as someone, who's living it. I've got my own kids. They are precious to me and they are not coming up in the same generation that I am. And they're curious. And I'm glad they're curious. I'm glad they're bringing it to me. So I have an opportunity to understand what they're thinking and what they're feeling and give them more information so that they can be grounded in mom's truth, dad's truth, and know that it's okay to be curious. So that's that perspective. And then as the moms that are, guiding uh, this generation and their ability to find some semblance of peace when they're probably feeling like they don't have a roadmap for this. No one told us that this year we would be having these types of experiences. And I think one of the best things that we can do for ourselves in these spaces is to honestly give ourselves grace, really be able to acknowledge that this is new and it's understandable to feel the things that you're feeling, have the thoughts that you're experiencing, and not expect yourself to have it all figured out. There might be days where you have some clarity and that's helpful. And there's other days where it's muddled and maybe not rushing yourself. It presents an opportunity to be able to learn that you can sit with some of the discomfort with practice, with the understanding that the idea is that you don't want to get stuck in an uncomfortable place, right? You want to have some strategies to move through that. So being able to notice where you are within yourself, being able to name that, being able to offer yourself some compassion and patience, and then decide, okay, what do I want to do with intention to support myself? And you
Totally.
might have some go-tos. And as a provider, I tend to like to ask, what do you know yourself to be good at? Comes to taking care of you through tough times. And
Nice.
sometimes it
Love
may
that question.
be turning on music to shift
Yeah,
energy,
totally.
watching a funny movie,
Yeah,
calling up a friend who can hold you as authentically and messy as you come. Sometimes we're enlightened and that's, okay. But being able to just be you and have someone hold you and receive you and say, I hear you without solving it for you can be so powerful. And so you might be thinking, oh, those seem like really basic strategies. I really like to ground my practice in practical, accessible, um, effective
yeah,
strategies. And if we want new things, we can talk about new things. But I like starting with those strengths that you may have forgotten about first.
yeah. No, I think it's fascinating because as I reflect upon like our own life and my wife and I's life, I'm running a startup. She's actively on the job market looking for a new opportunity after taking a break to, focus on raising her daughters. And um it's fascinating because I think there's this element of you're right. It's like culturally it is easy to try to go find a solution, but holding space isn't necessarily something um, in the man realm that is really taught, right, or modeled very well. And learned it. I don't think I'm quite as good as her girlfriends about it, but it seems like there is this element of just it's almost like how do you even get to step one? And that's my big question is what I'm trying to get an understanding for is even for the male listeners of this podcast, like how would you describe, like visually describe for me the pressure of like what it feels like in the most illustrative manner of like what does it feel like to hold the mental load?
Oh, like the female mental
Yeah.
load. Oh, wow. It's so interesting because it almost feels like this innate blessing slash curse that's passed down from generation to generation,
Okay.
almost from like an evolutionary, and you could almost describe it as like a survival mechanism
Wow.
to monitor and know and be present and be a couple steps ahead and be thinking the long game. It could be heavy, the crown that we wear. And I think men sometimes are mystified by it because even though we live it, it's so deeply ingrained on some level that there's an automaticity to it. And we almost actually make it look easy, such that it's maybe taken for granted.
So God, that is like literally one of the best descriptions I think I've ever heard. It's fascinating because I think a lot of mental health and the reason why I want to talk about it is I've heard this term perimenopause and kind of becoming more of a topic in the social webs and things like that. So for those listening, and I imagine this experience is almost at there's probably this intersection of when this starts to manifest in one's life if you have children, that mental load is hitting peak. It's sort of cresting as a wave, right? Can you describe what that is for just someone who's like new to the term? What is perimenopause? How does it manifest? What are some of the symptoms? What are some of the experiences that one goes through?
Yeah, and so you're not wrong. Perimenopause has become more of a buzzword lately, but it is a real thing. It's the part of our reproductive journey, right? We start with puberty, and in perimenopause, it really is the signaling that we are of a certain age where our reproductive system is beginning to decline. And it is a natural process for some of us because there can be different mediums by which one does enter into that space.
Yeah,
For some people, it might be younger for surgical reasons or
totally.
medication-based
Yeah,
reasons, and in those cases, it might be that it's more abrupt
yeah,
versus the natural perimenopause process that can start 10 to 16 years ahead of the final menstrual period,
yeah,
and then a year later, the full year without a menstrual period consecutively, and then it is menopause. It is going to vary by culture. It's going to vary by a lot of different circumstances. When we look at the average age of normal progression, menopause, it can happen at 45. So that means
wow,
as early as your 30s, you might start
wow,
symptoms of a natural perimenopause process. It is so challenging because the symptoms in our, like you said, very busy lives
totally.
around that age, your cycles might become a little shorter. They might become a little longer. You might actually have completely regular cycles, but there's all the symptoms that are silent that you wouldn't know that might be happening in the back. And what I mean by that
Yeah,
are things like your bone density might be changing right under your nose and you may not know it. You might be someone who's developing an insulin resistance you would not know about, among a lot of other silent things that are changing, which is why it's so important for us to know, generally speaking, when those changes might start happening. Now, I'd be remiss as a mental health provider to not mention the mental health part of it that you might start noticing in that
and what are some of those
space.
things?
So I'm going to go back to puberty for a second because that's a
Yeah,
space where our hormones are kind of all over
yeah,
the place,
yeah,
ovaries coming online, things of that nature. And that's where you might start dealing with things like PMS. And some
yeah,
people might have PMDD, which is more of a
yeah,
severe
version, yeah,
presentation of that. And I bring that up because we've got what are called windows of vulnerability, and puberty is the first. Our second window of vulnerability, if we choose to become mothers or happen to find ourselves pregnant, is going to be pregnancy, is another space where hormones do a lot of things. So, what may have come up in puberty might represent as a mental contender in pregnancy. And you might have already guessed, same thing with perimenopause. And it's perimenopause as compared to menopause. I want to be clear
wow.
because in perimenopause, our hormones
And it's
are,
a mark of a new transition.
yes, it is a roller coaster. So that's another space where mental health symptoms might hit and hit hard. Okay. And so just want to name that piece.
Wow. That's really, when you frame it in this manner, it's interesting. I mean, it just made me think in a lot of cultures and societies, we celebrate. Unfortunately, some don't celebrate, like a woman getting her period. And it's like this demarcation of womanhood. I've never heard of a celebration of going into perimenopause or menopause. And perhaps that should be something, because each one of those transitions is a new opportunity. It's a rebirth of sorts.
Yeah. No, I very much respect that sentiment. And I will say there have been some voices out there saying the same thing. And there are some cultures that understand the assignment of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
And they do celebrate the wisdom
absolutely.
of what it represents. And something I firmly believe in is yes, it does present an opportunity to redefine who you are for you and how you want to show up for others. And interestingly, one of the gifts of the perimenopause journey for many women is the I don't care what other people think.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
I'm
Totally.
do me and I'm not going to be as accommodating, and no is a complete sentence. And I'm okay with that. So there can be an empowerment that comes along with I'm dealing with this phase of my life. And for some women, they may not encounter very many disruptive symptoms, and other women might. And so there's a real variability in that. And what is challenging because women's health is behind in terms of research and even physicians, gynecologists, OBGYNs who you would generally think that's my go-to.
Yeah.
The training around that is very limited, and there's not a uniform curriculum getting all of those healthcare providers up to speed. So I'm even a provider who has taken upon myself over the course of 7 years to really steep myself in the literature and figure out what is going on at this phase. And because I'm a health and rehab psychologist, I certainly look at it within the context of other health conditions that a woman might have in conjunction
Yeah.
with their perimenopause experience.
I know we're coming close to time, and this is awesome. I think for anyone who's has a loved one or themselves are going through this phase, if they want to get in touch with you and find you and go deeper into this topic and come into an empowered and grounded state, um, where can they get more information on you, Dr. Hawes?
Yes. And so my clinical practice is www.mindfullybalancingwellness.com. And I can see people across 42 states. Education only, I can work with people across the country. I also have a coaching business that's specifically devoted to people navigating perimenopause and menopause. I also work with partners who are supporting the
Awesome.
woman in their life that might be navigating this space. And I work with healthcare providers who want to consult or have questions or are living the experience themselves. And that website is www.drstarlynhawes.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on Happy Hour. I feel an incredible energy shift, and the groundedness, the work that you do each day, and the wisdom that you've garnered is felt. And therapists speak, it's received for sure. And thank you for taking the time to be on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Oz. Thank you so much for joining us for Happy Hour. We hope you walked away having learned something and feeling a little less alone on the journey. If you liked what you heard, it would mean so much to us if you subscribe, can be notified every time we have a new episode. To learn more about what we are doing at HPY, go to thinkhpy.com. Until next time, we hope you feel heard. Take care.